That is the question that actually comes up pretty often about the sprinkler system.
Sure.
So if you are changing to a duplex, is it required, or is it required only for 3 units and up? When would you say is the right time for a landlord or a developer to bring in an architect into a project? Welcome back to the Philly Landlord Guy. I'm Yuri Skripchenko, your host, the guy with the crazy last name that you cannot remember. Just think of me as the Philly Landlord Guy. And if you're a landlord or investor in Philadelphia, you know that navigating city permits and getting your renovation plans right can be a massive headache. You try to save a buck with cheap drawings or a quick fix, but they often lead to costly delays, rejected permits, or even major structural issues down the line. Therefore, on today's episode, we're cutting through the noise with Jesse Smith, owner of JLS Architects. Jesse specializes in helping Philly landlords understanding the permit process, read plans like a pro, and avoid those expensive mistakes that can delay your project before it even starts. So let's jump right into it. Jesse, thank you for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background, and what led you to start your company?
Sure thing. So appreciate you having me today. My name is Jesse Smith. I'm a registered architect and the founder of JLS Architects. We're a boutique architecture firm based out of Glenside, Pennsylvania. Most of our projects are in the greater Philadelphia area, but we work all up and down the East Coast and throughout the US. My background, I was working as a partner at a larger architectural firm, and I had a odd situation where one of the team members on a project was being treated poorly by our client. And it was at that moment I realized I valued people over profits, and I decided to start my own firm so my team would never have to deal with that type of situation again. I established a philosophy of educating our clients and putting people first, which has allowed us a really unique opportunity to take on clients that have the motivation and the vision, but they may not necessarily have the understanding of what they need to do. So we're fortunate to be able to help them out with what they're unfamiliar with and grow with them through their real estate journey.
Okay, that all sounds good. So you mentioned that philosophy, that educating your clients and putting people first. How is that shaping your approach to the architecture, especially in the Philadelphia real estate market?
Having that educating clients and putting people first approach has allowed us to see people instead of projects. So we're able to connect with our clients. We're able to understand what they're trying to get out of a certain project or what they're trying to get out of a future project they may be thinking about. And I always tell our clients, we have to think like developers if we're going to work with developers.
Okay. So help us understand a little bit better the architect's role in or for Philadelphia landlord or developer. What exactly do architects do, and why do we need you?
It depends who you talk to as why we're needed. So architects, or most architects, I should say, are what's called systems thinkers. And a systems thinker is a person who can see all the different pieces of a puzzle and how they fit together. So sometimes we get told, oh, I've worked with a drafts person before, I've worked with an engineer, and everybody has their role on a project. But where an architect fits in is they take all those different pieces of a puzzle. They take the engineering aspect, they take your vision for the project, and they put it all together and help orchestrate a completed project at the end of the day. So we get involved in different stages of a project. Sometimes we get involved before someone even buys a property. Other times we're involved after things have gone haywire on a property that they were trying to flip, and L&I showed up and we need to come in and help save the day. So that's the general gist of like where an architect fits into the project. I also always say a good architect will challenge your thinking. So there's a lot of drafts people and engineers and even some architects that will really be a yes man, and they'll show up and say, yes, we can do that. Yes, yes, yes. And that's not necessarily what a good architect is there for. A good architect is there to challenge your thinking and to help you with a vision that you may not see yet.
Okay, so yeah, definitely. When L&I shows up, that's the aha moment that, oh, I need an architect involved.
That's the unfortunate aha moment, yes.
Yeah. So Jesse, when would you say is the right time for a landlord or a developer to bring in an architect into a project?
I think it's the sooner the better. A lot of the times we'll deal with clients who say, hey, I bought a property, when can you get started? And we'll say, okay, we can get that on our schedule for this day and we can do this. And they go, well, I wanted this done sooner. And we'll paint a picture and say, would you have been interested in starting this project before you bought it? And they go, I didn't even know that was a thing. So with some of our clients, as they're looking at a property and they're planning their due diligence and saying, I'm going to buy this in our closings in 30 or 60 days, they'll call us up and say, let's get started. We'll do the drawings. We'll have everything lined up so that the day they close on a project, they might be submitting for permits the very next day. And it's that kind of flow that helps them jumpstart and save about a month or so off of their project timeline. But they had to contact us in order to get that.
So as a landlord or as a developer, how do I know when I need to have an architect? Or like at which point should I think, oh, I probably should call Jesse and see what needs to be done here?
So when in doubt, give us a call and we'll tell you if it's something where we're going to provide a service. We have an architectural interest in the property. And sometimes I'll say, no, what you're looking at is like a make safe permit. And while I can do a make safe permit, you might save time or save cost by going with a structural engineer who specializes in that. There's different levels of alteration when you get into a project. So that's kind of defined by the existing building code. It's called level 1, 2, and 3 alteration. A level 1 alteration is really basic cosmetic stuff. If you're going in and you're going to add some wallpaper and paint and new flooring and move on, we may not be needed as an architect. But if you're talking about changing space or an addition to the building or something that's more substantial, that's when you give us a call and we'll help bring that to reality.
So what is the difference between level 1, 2, and 3? And can you break down each one of these levels?
Sure. So the levels of alteration are actually defined by what's called the International Existing Building Code. So when we hear people refer to things as grandfathered in, this is actually what they're referring to. There's no code that says if something's grandfathered in. It's just layman's terms instead of saying the International Existing Building Code. So we always say, hey, it's been grandfathered in, or it could be grandfathered in. It's a lot easier than saying the work area compliance method, or we have a different compliance method per the International Existing Building Code. So a level 1 alteration, again, is just cosmetic. It means there's no change to spatial orientation. That's like saying you're going to do painting, you might be doing new flooring, maybe you're going to put up some window blinds, but it doesn't really change the spatial orientation of how someone uses the space. You're not adding walls, doors, or windows.
So if you are replacing doors, windows, and maybe kitchen cabinets, would that still be level 1, or?
Yes, that would be a level 1. It gets kind of nuanced because at that point it might fall under the jurisdiction of a repair as opposed to an alteration. An alteration means you're actually changing something. Mm-hmm. So a repair is if you'd say, hey, the door got kicked in and we have to replace the door. That's a repair. You shouldn't need a permit to replace a door somewhere in the building as long as you're replacing it in kind with the same material, same type of door. But an alteration means you're actually changing something. You're swapping out a countertop from plastic laminate to solid surface. You're putting in new window blinds that are like plantation blinds as opposed to the old school metal, 1-inch window blinds. So as soon as you're changing something, it becomes an alteration. And then a level 2 alteration is when you start actually changing the space of a space. So if you're adding a new wall, if you're going to open up a wall, a lot of the times we see people who say they want the open concept living, kitchen, dining on the first floor.
Right.
And you might find a row home where you have to take out some of those walls. That's an alteration to space. That's considered a level 2 alteration. And the trigger between a level 2 to a level 3 alteration is just a numbers game. It's if you're touching more than 50% of the footprint at one time. So if you're gutting the entire first floor on a 2-story row home, you're only touching 50%. It's a level 2 alteration. If you're gutting the entire second floor and the first floor, it's now a level 3 alteration. The way that the code defines this and some of the implications of doing a level 3 alteration just means that any area you're touching needs to be brought up to code compliance. On something like a row home flip, for instance, that usually means we're talking about smoke detector systems. We're probably not talking about sprinkler systems unless we're changing gross area or we're doing more uses in the building, such as converting it to multifamily. But if we're just working within the existing confines of something like a single family home, you're usually looking at a level 2 or level 3 alteration.
Okay. That is the question that actually comes up pretty often about the sprinkler system.
Sure.
So if you are changing to a duplex, is it required, or is it required only for 3 units and up?
If you're taking a single family home and changing it from a single family to a duplex, and you're not doing any additions to the building, you're not going up a story, you're not building out into the backyard, and you're just focusing on the existing shell of what's already there, it's not actually a change of use, because the use of the building is considered an R3 occupancy, which means it's 1 or 2 family dwelling. So if you're taking it from 1 to 2 family, it still counts as an R3 occupancy, and sprinkler systems aren't required. Now, with that said, you may find that there's some plan examiners out there and some L&I inspectors who either misinterpret the codes or provide their own unique interpretation to the codes, and they may tell you you need a sprinkler system. We see that happen less than 10% of the time. So I always tell people to be aware of it. If you're able to bake that into your pro forma and into your budget, just as a worst case scenario, great. If not, push back and tell L&I it's not actually required. It's only a duplex, and it was a single family home.
So are you talking about if we had a single family home that was already zoned as a multifamily, or even if it's just single family and it's zoned as a single family, and we went through a zoning board, we got a variance for it to be used as a duplex, and now at this point we can just rehab it into a duplex if we're not building anything out, and we should not be required to get sprinkler system?
There's a misconception about what zoning is and what zoning isn't. So zoning allows you to put a use in a space, but zoning is separate from the building code. So even if the building is zoned for multifamily, or if it's zoned commercial, let's say you have a property that's zoned industrial, and the only by right uses that you could put in there would be, a chemical shop, if it's that type of zoning. And you say, well, we're going to have we have a single family today, and we're going to convert it to a 2 family. There's no change in use. It still is an R3 to an R3. Zoning might have an issue with that, and they'll say you can't create a multifamily or a 2 family use here. And that's when you would have to go through the appeal process through a zoning hearing board. But zoning and building code are 2 distinct and separate entities.
Okay. So we're talking about here about the specific building codes. We're not talking about zoning codes.
Correct. We're talking about the building code says you're allowed to put this in without a sprinkler system. Zoning has no say whether or not a sprinkler system is required.
Okay. So can you take us a little bit through the permitting process in Philadelphia? It sometimes can feel like a maze. And what a typical Philly landlord or developer needs to take to get a building permit in Philly?
Sure. So your building permits are always going to depend on what the actual scope of work that you're doing is. Sometimes that permit might be what's called an easy permit, which is when you don't even need architectural plans or engineering plans. It's where you fill out a piece of paper that says, I'm really not changing anything significant. You take it into L&I, and they give you what's called an easy permit. No plans or drawings required. If it's not owner occupied, you can do those same easy plans by getting an architect or a structural engineer to sign off and say, they're really not changing anything. The building's not going to collapse by doing these minor repairs or these minor alterations. And you can still get an easy permit that way. As soon as you're talking about changing space, that's when we say we want our help to be involved to help guide you in that right direction of what is the best layout for what you're trying to do. So if you're reconfiguring a row home and you're rehabbing it and it's a full gut, there's likely some other underlying things where we would be providing assistance, such as, are we putting in a new mechanical system where we now need shaft work? Is it a new mechanical system where we're going to need soffits? How do those things kind of correspond with the design intent you're going for? And do you want some design direction, maybe all the way down to interior design with picking finishes and helping actually figure out how the space comes together on the interior? So on the permitting side, normally you're going to find for a typical Philly landlord that they're looking at what's called an RP permit, a residential permit. The alternative to that is a commercial building permit, which you would get if you're doing 3 units or more, or any type of commercial work, a mixed use building or strictly commercial. So most of the time we see clients that for something like a Philly landlord are looking at a single family home or a duplex, and they're going in and trying to get that residential building permit. There's a couple of things that they'll need to submit through Eclipse, and Eclipse is the name of the online system that you'll use to submit your permits online. You can also walk them into the municipal services building and do it the old school way with 3 print copies, but most of the time they prefer the online submission. It gives you a tracking number. It gives you everything that you need. So it's all on an online portal that you can access remotely anywhere. So usually you're going to need a residential building permit, which may have architectural drawings. It may need a structural report. If you're doing something like moving stairs around or building an addition, it may also need structural drawings that are signed by a structural engineer. And if you're doing any utility work, such as putting in a new sewer connection or new water lines, or let's say you're putting in a sprinkler system and need a dedicated water line for that, all of those things would require a utility plan. So it's not necessarily a permit through the city of Philadelphia, but a utility plan goes through the Philadelphia Water Department, and it's a prerequisite for some of your other permit applications.
So all of that sounds very complicated. Let me rewind a little bit back and ask you a couple of questions about easy permits.
Sure.
So you mentioned that if it's owner occupied or non-owner occupied. So let's say, well, since we're talking about landlords, most of this will come and play for non-owner occupied buildings.
Sure.
So let's say I'm a landlord and I have, I don't know, regular row house in Philly, and my tenants moved out and I need to do what most people would consider a rehab, but I'm not going to crush the walls. I'm not going to move the walls or do any structural changes. What I'm doing, I'm just replacing my, I don't know, carpet with vinyl. I'm putting new kitchen cabinets, new countertops, new bathrooms, like toilets, tubs, tile, whatever that can be, just making it look nice, right? And doing painting, maybe some window replacements. Can all of that be qualified as an easy permit? And to something you mentioned that for non-occupied properties, for easy permit, you will need to have an architect sign on that.
Correct. So you have a report that's done by an architect or engineer where they sign off and say that what you're doing is not going to collapse the building. That's essentially what L&I is looking for in that letter. You will need your building permit. You'll need a plumbing permit. If you're doing mechanical work, you'll need a mechanical permit. And if you're touching anything with the electrical, so another common one is after tenants move out, now might be the time to decide that you want to upgrade to 200 amp service, or you might want to put in some new receptacles or some grounded outlets in the bathroom. Anything you're touching electrically would then require a separate electrical permit.
So what would it look like for an architect? Let's say I'm doing this renovation. I'm just calling, hey, Jesse, I'm doing this. Can you sign up? Or like you will need to come out and see the project. What the process will look like?
Yeah, so typically we would come out, we'd see the property, we'd put together an as-built set of drawings or an existing condition set of drawings. So unless you have the original floor plans of what's there today, it's now our responsibility to go out and measure the rooms, walls, doors, windows, and draw up the plan of what it looks like as we're there on the site. After that, any changes that you want noted, new countertops, new flooring, add a wall here, anything like that gets put onto those drawings, and those drawings then get signed and sealed and submitted to the city for your residential building permit.
Okay. And if it's an easy permit, that does it mean that the city will not come out to do inspections when you do the work?
They are supposed to still come out and do inspections. That really depends on the individual inspector and which district you're working in. But most of the time they are supposed to come out and see it through a pre-construction inspection, which is where they look at the site and just say, okay, this is what it is, and we understand what you're doing. There might be intermediate inspections if you're doing something like plumbing rough-in or plumbing final or electric rough-in or electric final, or a handful of other inspections that might be required. And then at the very end of the project is when they do their final inspection. And if everything is well, they give you a certificate of occupancy.
I am as a landlord, let's say again, our example that I have this house, tenants just moved out, I'm doing some renovations, just sprucing up the property. And how do I know what to do? Like, I mean, you know that they will come out at this time, they will come out at that time, and they will come out at this time as well. Let's say I just listened to this podcast and I know that I need to get my easy permit. I call Jesse and tell Jesse, hey, can you sign up on my project? You did. I submitted it through Eclipse. I'm happy I got my easy permit. So what now? How do I know who to contact, or do I need to contact anyone, or I just go ahead and do my project and then tell LNI that, hey, it's done?
So when you get your permit issued, as part of the permit, they'll outline what inspections are required. So there's usually a framing inspection, there's a wallboard inspection, you have your electrical, your plumbing, and your mechanical rough-ins and finals, and then you have your final inspection. It'll also notify you on the permit. It says contact us this many days before you actually need us out there. So you can't call up and say, hey, I finished framing, are you guys coming out today? Some inspectors may, but they usually need a day or two to get out there to actually see the work. You may also have third-party inspectors. So if you're doing certain types of work where you need either special inspections or it's third-party, one thing that a lot of landlords will run into is electrical. So the electrical is going to be a third-party inspection agency. So that's not someone from the city of Philadelphia. That's a third-party certified inspector who's coming out and testing all the electrical and making sure it's up to code. If you were doing certain structural modifications, you may have structural special inspections, post-tension anchor bolts, foundations, rebar, things like that may come up, but aren't very typical for something like a row home full gut rehab.
How do I know if I need to get electrical permit and plumbing permit as well?
If you're touching any part of those elements, if you're swapping out plumbing fixtures, if you're adding new sections of pipe, you'll need a permit for that in the city of Philadelphia. So as you go through that Eclipse system, it'll start asking you questions and say, how many new toilets are you putting in? How many new sinks? And if you start filling out zeros for all these things and you get to the end, you'll realize, I don't think I need this permit. There's also an industry of permit expediters whose sole job is to take your drawings, they go into the city, and they're responsible for getting you those permits. That industry is still around. I think it's slowed down a little bit over the last few years, but there still are permit expediters whose sole job it is to get you permits once you give them plans.
Why do you think it slowed down? Is it getting easier with the permit since we can do it online now, or what?
I think the switch to online hurt that industry quite a bit. A lot of permit expeditors used to have the role of what you were paying for in the certified is to sit in a desk, so similar to sitting in a chair, similar to sitting at the DMV. And when your ticket number is called, they go up, hand the plans in, answer any questions, and get you permits. Now that everything's online, most of those expeditors are still submitting things online. Some still submit it in person, but it's really a personal preference.
Yeah, makes sense. So, Jesse, what is your advice for someone who's thinking of converting single-family property into a duplex in Philly? And what are specific zoning and permit hurdles that they should be aware of?
Sure. So first, you always want to check the zoning and see if it's allowed by right. So if you're in a RM1 property, for instance, and RM1 zoned property, and you have a single family, as long as the lot size meets the minimum requirements as set by the zoning code, and there's a couple other minor things that you have to check, but as long as it meets the zoning requirements for a two-family, you can go and get a zoning permit pretty quickly. You can file that today, you can get it in 2 to 3 days, and they'll say, here's your zoning permit that allows you to convert this to a two-family. So that's the zoning side of it. The alternative to that zoning side is if it's not allowed by right, which is if they'd say, hey, it's zoned RSA 5, a duplex isn't allowed by right. And if you want to appeal that, when they issue you a refusal, they'll say, okay, Yuri, you're not allowed to do a duplex here, and they'll list a reason. They'll say it's not, two-family use is not permitted by right. If you want to appeal this, you have 30 days, and here's the process. And then you can appeal that. And talking about the appeals, we can either do that now, or that might be a conversation for another day. But the appeal process takes a couple months. It obviously costs some time and money, but then you typically get a variance for your two-family use in that single-family home. Once you have zoning out of the way, then you get into the building code side of it. So we ask the question, what are you actually doing with the house? Are you fully gutting it? If you're fully gutting it, that's a really good start. because that means we're putting in all new electrical, we're putting in all new plumbing, mechanicals, we're going to put in the required fire ratings, the required sound ratings, all the stuff that's needed for you to get a building permit is a lot easier to do once the building's been gutted. If you're trying to keep the first floor and turn that into a studio apartment and add another apartment upstairs, it's a lot of tougher coordination to figure out how we actually get those fire ratings, the sound ratings, get those electrical hookups without ripping open every wall to figure out what's inside of it.
And we often hear that people want to convert a basement into a separate living space. It can be just a regular 3-bedroom row house, and they have like this attached garage with a basement, which is a big space, or it can be maybe already a duplex, but they have a big garage downstairs again with a basement that they want to convert into a third unit. So is there any additional problems when you're trying to convert a basement into a living space?
There's not necessarily problems, but there's definitely some considerations. So certain zoning districts might require you to have parking on site. So turning a garage into that bedroom, which is something we often see proposed, might not be as easy as it sounds. You may still have a requirement to have a parking stall on your site. If you have a driveway, that might not be an issue. But if that row home had that garage right against the street or right against the alleyway, it's a lot tougher, and you may need a variance for that. The other consideration is that these basements were never previously designed when these homes were built in the 1800s and early 1900s to have living in the basement. They were really meant as ancillary storage spaces or garages or mechanical. And when we go to turn that into a habitable space, we have to make sure it's waterproof. We have to make sure we're putting the right finishes down there, the right materials. If we're talking wood frame construction, this isn't putting a normal 2x4 against the floor. It needs to be pressure treated, or else that 2x4 is going to rot out in a couple of years. So there's just different considerations before you even start about the design of it. And then on the design side of it, we have to make sure if we're putting a bedroom or a living space down there, that it meets the ceiling height requirements, it meets the area of the room requirements, and that you have egress from that space. So usually where the basement units get hung up is on the egress side. If you don't have an egress well or a big enough window that meets those requirements, you may have to put in an egress well.
How big of the window you should have for the egress in the basement?
So if you're putting in a new use, it generally needs to conform to a new, what's called an EERO, an emergency escape and rescue opening. And I forget the sizes off the top of my head, but it's about 24 inches wide, and I think it's 36 inches tall or 30 inches tall minimum. But the window also needs a clear opening of 5.7 square feet. So that's the big number that you have to hurdle. So you can have a skinny window that's really tall, but it needs to meet that 5.7 square foot opening. And the rationale for that is that's the square footage that a firefighter would need if they're trying to get into the building.
Okay, that makes sense. So what would you say are the most common and costly pitfalls or delays that you see landlords encounter when trying to get permits in Philly?
There's two really big things that most landlords forget when they're trying to, that delay them when they're trying to get permits. One is what's called the waste hauler form. So when they're filling out their permit application, one of the required documents for any permit is called a waste hauler form. So the city of Philadelphia has a problem, and they're mitigating it, but they had a problem where a lot of contractors were taking their trash from job sites and dumping it on the side of the road. And Elle and I would find this trash on the side of the road, and the streets department would clean it up, and nobody knew who the trash belonged to. And everybody might have an idea and go, it might be that contractor who's working a couple blocks over, but they couldn't prove it. So what the city did is they implemented this waste hauler form, and it requires the contractor to keep their dump receipts for when they take their trash to the dump. And the city is allowed to audit you and say, okay, you're prove to me that you actually took all your trash to the dump. And if you don't have those dump receipts, they can fine you, they can revoke your contractor's license. There's other repercussions of things they can do. Having that waste hauler form signed is something that always gets forgotten. And on countless projects, we'll have a client reach out to us and say, hey, we got permit comments back. Can you fix whatever it is? And I say, sure, send it over. and they send it over, and I go, there's only one permit comment. They go, well, fix it then. And we go, well, it's actually on you. You have to provide the waste hauler form. You never uploaded it. And they attach that comment to our drawings. So that can cause a significant delay, because now they have to go out, get their contractor to sign the waste hauler form, resubmit it, and wait for L&I to review that document. The other one is just owner signatures on various forms. So depending on the type of construction you're doing, you may have a energy compliance certificate form, you may have a special inspections form, you may have notice and prerequisites to your neighbors if you're doing something like digging or underpinning or anything on the property line. Usually those forms are filled out by us. So we'll have to fill it out. We have to put in all the design criteria, and then we hand it to you and say, okay, Yuri, when you go to submit this, there's a spot at the bottom where you as the owner have to actually sign off that you read this form. And most owners forget that the first time they do it, and that causes a significant delay in the permitting process.
So is that form something standard that you can just find online, or is something that you need to create yourself?
No, most of those forms are pretty standard things you can find online. So the waste hauler form you can find on Philly's L&I document lookup. Same with the residential certificate for energy compliance, and same with the special inspections.
You know what's funny about it? City of Philadelphia always creates all of these permits and licenses and whatever else fines that you need to pay, and they only applicable to people who actually following the rules, applying for the permits and getting the licenses. Because if you don't, they don't even know that you exist, and that goes for everything, as well as the rental license and everything else in real estate in the city that you're doing. Sometimes it's very upsetting.
It certainly can be upsetting, and we've met clients who that's part of their MO, is they say, look, the penalty to getting caught without permits is I'm going to pay 3 times the permit fee. So they'll still get drawings done by us. They may not submit them. And their goal is to get caught on less than 1/3 of those instances, because that's their game plan. And more often, the city's been cracking down on that. The city has other ways where they're tracking owners by properties. That's why they're asking for who equitable owners are as part of LLCs. And they're trying to keep tabs on how do they get to those people before they commit those violations. So the city's gotten a little bit better at it over the last 4 or 5 years, but there are still plenty of people out there, especially fly-by-night contractors, who do work without permits.
Yeah. So when we're talking about all of this, possibly zoning approvals, change of use, applying for the permits, construction, plumbing, electrical, whatever it can be, how much extra time should a landlord or a developer factor in for this type of approvals and permits?
So the city publishes their standard processing times on the L&I database. It changes depending on the type of year and the time of year and how busy they are. Generally speaking, they allocate 20 business days for your building permit. And now I always need to clarify and say that's how long they have to review it. That's not meaning they're going to approve it in 20 days. That means in 20 business days, they may come back and say, we have a question about a dimension here, or we have a question about this wall tag. And you can answer their question, give it back, and they say, okay, I have 20 more days. And if a reviewer really doesn't like you and wants to play hardball, they'll have one question for you every 20 days on the dot, and they can play that game for months and months and months.
How often do you see that happen?
We see that happen once or twice a year. It's usually when the client gets really pushy with L&I. So they submit their plans and 20 business days comes around, and people are people. Everyone is just trying to get through and do their job. And if you're a landlord who calls up your L&I plan examiner and says, starts cursing them out and says, it's been 21 days and you have only 20 days to do it, they'll go, yeah, I'll get you a comment. And they will. They'll get you a comment and you'll review it. And 20 days later, they'll give you another comment. Now, if you call them up and you say, hey, just want to check in, I'm just trying to get an understanding of where we're at. Is there anything you need on my part? You're trying to act like a human because they're a human. Those types of interactions typically go a lot better.
Well, it's human interaction. I think it's not just L&I, it's with anyone. If you're behaving as a human, you probably will get human behavior back. But in general, if we're not talking about the interactions from the landlord side, how often do you see that instead of approving, they come back with some kind of questions?
It really depends on the plan examiner. There's some plan examiners who are known to be a little bit easier in the permitting process, and there's some other ones that you roll your eyes and smack your forehead when you see their name as your plan examiner. There's about 20 or so plan examiners at the city, so you have a 5% chance of getting any one of them. It really just depends on the individual. So usually you're talking about getting that approval on the lengthier side of the process. When we hand our client our permit drawings, I say, expect that you'll have your building permit in about 60 days. And they go, 60 days? I thought they have 20 days to review it. And they go, we tell them they're going to come back with some type of question or comment. It may not even be applicable. It may be totally asinine, but they will come back with some type of question or comment. We'll address it and you'll resubmit it. That's normal. And in the pleasant off chance it doesn't happen, it's exactly that. It's a very pleasant experience where they go, I got my building permit in 10 days. And we go, that's great to hear. You had a really nice reviewer. We had a nice set of drawings and those things paired really well. But ultimately it comes down to the human element of who's working at L&I.
Okay. And when you submit those plans for the permit, you know the contact person that you can call to or like email? Whatever.
Not right away. So once they review it and it'll be assigned to a reviewer, they'll have their name on the permit comments that come back to you. And that's when you can submit that request to them directly.
I was just wondering when I can call and yell at them.
You can always file. Philadelphia has a jot form where if you haven't gotten any review comments after that initial 20 days, you could fill it out and say, it's been past 20 days. Where are we at with it? They might give you a bad answer and say, oh, we had some government holiday here, so we have an extra 2 days of our time. Or they may just not respond, which is also very typical of L&I.
Yeah. So now we have our plans approved and we have our permits out where we received them. Mm-hmm. So without diving into inspection politics, what should landlords be aware of when it comes to keeping a job site and compliance and avoiding unnecessary issues with L&I?
Clean job sites look really nice, and clean job sites feel nice for the field inspectors. So whichever district you're in the city, there will be a field inspector that comes out who's actually inspecting the work as you do it. So when you call in for that inspection and say, hey, we're ready for our framing, this guy will come out. He's going to meet you on site. He's going to walk around, maybe take some photos, take some measurements, and ultimately say, yes, you passed that inspection. If there's junk on the floor, if there's tools laying all over, if it looks like it's just a really unsafe job site, that inspector is going to look around and go, he's going to try to find something wrong to hit you with. I always liken it to, if you go to a restaurant and you see a mouse run across the floor, the food might be great, but now you already have an outlook as to how you're perceiving that restaurant. So you think about it and go, if I keep a clean job site, if I have a set of plans as soon as the guy walks in, you have a folding table, you have the set of prints right there, you're going to answer all the questions that they don't even know they have yet. And those two things, a clean job site and plans right at the front door, get so many people through permits and inspections that they may have gone a different way had it been a tougher inspector or had the inspector actually looked around at what they were constructing. Contractors aren't perfect, inspectors aren't perfect, but you do the best with what you can between those two people and just try to get through the day and have a project that's code compliant.
Yeah, that's actually was the next question. So how do you find those contractors who are willing and able to deal with all of that? Because it's not easy to find a contractor, period. But to find a contractor that would match all of that, I think it's like a unicorn. So on that topic, can a landlord, the property owner, be the one who's putting their name on the permit, or you have to have licensed contractor who will be getting that permit?
You have to have a licensed contractor who's pulling the permit for you. So even when you're filling out the permit application through Eclipse or taking it to the municipal services building, one of the questions is, who is the contractor and what's their license number? Now, you don't need to fill that out because you may not know just then. If you're just submitting an application, you're going, I'm still interviewing a couple of contractors. I have it narrowed down to 2 or 3, but I don't know who it is yet. You can submit the application without listing a contractor. L&I can review the drawings. They can say, okay, the permit's ready to be approved. Oh, but hold on, you didn't list a contractor. So they'll issue what's called a permit hold. And they'll say, as soon as you tell us who the contractor is and list their number here, we'll give you the permit, but that's the last piece of the puzzle. And that's just to prevent you from going and pulling the permits and going, you know what, I don't need a contractor, I'll do it myself. So the city wants some type of licensed contractor to be taking the responsibility for that job site.
Okay. And for the building permit, what type of contractor do you need to have?
You'll need a general contractor. So a general contractor can pull the residential building permit. You'll need a master plumber to pull the plumbing permit, and you'll need a licensed electrician to pull the electrical permit. The mechanical permit can be pulled by that same general contractor. The thought process is there's not a whole lot of risk involved if you are sizing ductwork wrong, or if you're sizing something with the mechanicals a little incorrectly. You know, no one's going to get hurt or die because you sized the HVAC system incorrectly. So they allow that responsibility to be on the general contractor. But things like plumbing and electric, those are really pushed heavily where you need a licensed professional there to pull those permits.
And when you're referring to mechanical permit, what exactly that is? What does that include?
So that would be like if you're doing ductwork, if you're putting in a new HVAC unit, anything that is related to HVAC falls under that mechanical permit. So mini splits or forced air system or ducted splits, anything related to mechanical falls under a mechanical building permit or mechanical permit.
So even if you put mini splits, it's not exactly like any ducted type of AC or HVAC system, I guess. You don't need to have an electrician for that. You need to have...
Well, the electrician's still going to do the hookup. In that case, like an electrician will still be doing the disconnect. They're still wiring it to the panel box. There's still an electrical component where the electrician is responsible for. But the actual connecting of line sets, for instance, that can be on the general contractor.
You shared with me before an example of problematic plans that you saw. And from what I gather, you get them pretty often from your clients sending whatever they have from people who may not be specifically architects, just drawings for them. So for listeners or viewers who might be reviewing drawings from an architect or a draft person, what are the absolute essentials that you have to have on a set of the drawings? And what are the red flags that you're looking for?
So it's always going to be drawing and project specific. The drawings are going to look a lot different for an addition, like a third floor addition, than they would for adding a basement unit. But generally speaking, the drawing should always contain some sort of code summary. They should tell you what's the construction type, what are the applicable codes. Did the person who draw this, do they even know what codes are? And if they're not listing the code sections on their first sheet, they probably don't know the codes. You should also look for things like partition types and wall, floor, and ceiling assemblies. So how are these things actually getting built? Are they just saying put in a new wall? Or are they giving you a diagram that says it's a 2x4, there's drywall on this side, you have an RC channel, you have insulation? How are they describing those elements that go into the actual assemblies of things like walls, floors, and ceilings? And then a description of work. So L&I is getting a set of drawings, but they may not know what they're looking at. So L&I has to look at it and they're going to say, like, what am I trying to do? It's a spot the difference type thing. They're going to go, okay, this looks like a new wall, or maybe, I don't know, this looks like a new door, maybe, I don't know. So if you have a description of work that says, this is what we're doing inside this building, makes everyone's life easier, especially for you as the landlord, because one of the things you have to fill out as part of your permit application is a text box that says, describe the scope of work. So we do it in a way internally on our team where we type that up so you can just copy and paste that text right into the scope box. You don't have to look at the drawings and make assumptions. It's just copy and paste, and it saves you a couple minutes of your life.
Yeah, I wanted to take a quick break from conversation with Jesse and thank our sponsor, TrustArt Realty, your full-service property management company here in Philadelphia. Whether you're just getting started or scaling your portfolio, TrustArt Realty helps you stay compliant, efficient, and profitable. For all of our listeners, they offer a free rental analysis or property management evaluation. You can submit the form by clicking the link in the show notes or send us an email at trustartrealty@PhillyLandlordGuy.com or info@trustartrealty.com. And let's get back into our conversation now. So what happens during the project? Let's say we already passed all of those stages. We have our permits and all of that. And during the project, we realize that something is not right and we need to change it. just maybe, I don't know, a location of the door or a window. We just didn't account for this HVAC duct that has to be in this corner. Now we need to move our wall or whatever it can be. That happens all the time. So how do we deal with that?
So it's a gray area. Some of those things can be identified as what's called field changes. So let's say you're going to put in, a bathroom vanity that's 30 inches wide, and you go, we actually have more room here, and there was a sale on a 36-inch vanity, and we can still fit it, and it works. You put in a 36-inch vanity, and truthfully, no one knows the difference. The inspector's not going to pick up on it. You're the only person who knows because you bought something different. If you're talking about something where it's a major change, you say, you know what, we actually realized that we have an extra 15 feet of depth on the house. We thought the house was 35 feet deep and it's actually 50 feet deep. We're going to put another bedroom in here. That's a major change. And again, it's subjective, but most people would say that's a major change. And then what you have to do is called a permit amendment. So you take revised drawings, you submit it as an amendment to the current permit you have. L&I reviews it, and they then reissue those and say, here's a amended drawing.
So Jesse, can you share a real example of a project that went sideways because of bad drawings or
Sure.
Bad planning?
Bad drawings, bad planning, and bad understanding. So another part of our business is we do independent drawing reviews. So we take other clients and other architects' drawings, and we mark up other architects and design professionals' drawings. And we're looking at things like constructability. Can you actually build what they're showing on the plans? Is it complete?
Hopefully you can.
Hopefully you can, but you'd be surprised. Is it complete? Is it something where they actually give all the information you need in order to do this project? And are there just any general design errors or omissions? Are they just leaving out a door schedule and leaving that up for your interpretation? Are they not telling you anything that's going on with the wall types? So we recently had a project where the previous architect had designed a 4-story building, and it was 6 apartments. And it was 4 stories, 6 apartments. Each apartment, was a 2-bedroom, 2.5-bathroom apartment. Had a nice formal dining room, had plenty of space. They had some walk-in closets. They were pretty nice. Doesn't sound like any issues yet. But as we started going through the plans, we said, okay, it turns out that they had to obtain a variance for multifamily. The site was only zoned for single family. They went through the process and they got a variance to put in these 6 units. We sat down with the client and said, tell us the essence of the project. What are you trying to do here? What is the goal of what this project is about? And they said, well, we're building this ground up apartment building. This is in West Philadelphia. It's going to be Section 8 housing. We went, time out. Why are we doing a 1,400 square foot, 2-bedroom, 2.5-bathroom with walk-in closets in West Philadelphia for Section 8 housing? And they said, that's what our architect drew up. And we said, well, Section 8 is the perfect example. There's a fixed rent that you can run as part of your calculation. So we said, how much rent are you getting? And they said, this amount of dollars. And we said, does your pro forma make sense with that? And they went, not really. We went, okay, so where are you at in the process? And they said, well, we're ready to go in and submit for building permits. We just wanted you to look them over and provide any comments. And then other things started popping up. We said, the building is higher than what's allowed. They're going to need a variance for the building height. They didn't show that the roof actually had a slope to it. So they drew it incorrect. They drew it as a true flat roof with no slope. And because of that, that's how they were able to be underneath the zoning height allowance. So when we put in what the actual floor assembly thickness was, when we put in what the roof minimum pitched slope was, the building ended up being about 3 feet higher than what's allowed by code.
Wow.
And it caused a complete redesign. So as part of what we did is we said, we're going to help you sketch something out. We're going to say, and because it was a 4-story building, it needed 2 stair towers and 2 means of egress. We said, we're going to shrink this thing down to a 3-story building. We're going to get 2 apartments per floor. We're going to get you the same 2-bedroom units that you had. It's going to give you the same rent for Section 8. And at the end of the day, we were able to reduce the building footprint by 40%, wow, which had a projected construction cost reduction of about 35 to 40% as well. So now they have units that make sense for their end goal. Now, if this was luxury housing, it may have been a different story. But for Section 8, we said, you're still going to get the same rent, whether it's a 2-bed, 1-bath or a 2-bed, 2.5-bath, and whether or not you have this formal dining room and walk-in closets. They're much nicer amenities, don't get me wrong, but your pro forma will never work. So they went through this redesign. They learned a very expensive lesson about communicating their goals, and they also went back to the architect and had some frank conversations about things they missed. But they're re-going through that process through zoning right now, and it's probably going to waste about 6 to 10 months for them.
Yeah, that's definitely a significant
Absolutely.
reduction in the cost and significant increase in the time. That actually brings up something that I personally deal with pretty often, is that not even on the projects like that, not new construction, not something that is getting designed specifically, but something. But we have a lot of out-of-state investors who come into Philly, buying this standard row house, I don't know, brewery town, let's say. They buy a 3-bedroom house and they make it nice, like very nice, spend a lot of money doing that. And then they expect that they will get some tremendous amount of rent for it, which is not happening. It doesn't matter how nice you make that house, it's not going to happen.
Right.
So if they were to come to you at the time when they're applying for the permits, hopefully they are applying for them, but if they come to you at the time when they apply for permits, or they tell you that, hey, I'm trying to get this easy permit, for example, and you ask them the same question, what are you trying to do here? Is it something that you can catch as well and tell them, like, why are you trying to do that? It doesn't make any sense, or not exactly?
Yeah, usually we can identify that. So we try to understand, we're not here just to provide, I'm an architect. Our firm's a group of architects. We're providing a service, but too often that gets misconstrued and people think we're providing a product. They say, how much for blueprints? And when we get asked that question, we go, you're barking up the wrong tree. We can give you a set of plans, but it's not just the same set of plans that we gave to the last person. Your situation is unique from the next person. It's unique from the previous person. And if we understand what you're trying to get out of it, if you say, I'm buying this property in Brewery Town, and we go, why are you buying a property in Brewery Town? You go, well, my grandfather is going to live on the first floor, and rather than put him in an old folks home, we said he can have the first floor apartment. We're going to turn the upstairs into another unit, and that unit's going to cover the cost for my grandfather to live there. We go, that's great. But now we're taking a different approach to design than someone who says, I'm trying to do Section 8 housing and fit a triplex here, versus someone else who says, I want to turn this into my dream single family home. So no two homes are ever exactly the same. There's a lot of similar themes, but we need to understand what the scope actually is, what your budget is, and what your timetable looks like. And those 3 pieces all get pushed together and cause this weird trifecta of the essence of your project. And then we have to overlay that with your goals and expectations.
So you touched on a good point. You need to know what my budget is. How do I know what my budget is? If let's say I'm a landlord or I'm a new investor, I just bought this property in Brewery Town. I have literally zero idea what it's going to cost me to do anything with it. I do not know anything about the permitting. I do not know anything if I need to have zoning done or not, how much time it will take. How do I know how to budget for a project like that?
So it's tough. There's different ways you can budget. They always say, like in real estate, usually you're making your money on the acquisition. If you're buying a single family home and you're planning to flip it, but you bought a single family home in Brewery Town for $500,000, you're already $500,000 in the hole. It doesn't matter how cheap your construction is, you're going to have a hard time making a profit. Now, if you're going out and buying something sheriff's sale or off market, or even just an on market deal that's at a good value, that's where you're going to make your long-term money if your plan is to do something like a refinance out of it. It's different than if it's your single family home for you personally, but that's really not the client we're dealing with here as a Philadelphia landlord. So when we talk about what do those budgets look like, there's all sorts of different rules of thumb and tools and contractor talks you can have to understand what you're dealing with. We hear contractors say, oh yeah, I'm flipping single family homes for $80 a square foot. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Probably not. We hear other people say, hey, we're flipping homes and we're spending $150 a square foot on the interior. We go, that's kind of where we're seeing this trend right now. But square foot numbers aren't very accurate. They're a good ballpark for an investor to say, I'm going to buy a 2,000 square foot house If I'm going to put $100 a square foot into it, there's your construction budget. Add on your contingency, talk to other contractors, understand the scope, and you have a ballpark idea. But that's never the best way to do it. Relying on that cost per square foot usually leads to significant budget overruns, and there's better approaches. So there's what's called a AACE cost estimating class budget. And this is where, if you've heard of like garbage in, garbage out, if you're getting bad drawings, you're going to get bad pricing. Nobody really knows what you're expecting. If the drawings get better, now the contractor can actually price off of tangible things. They can say, oh, you want Kohler plumbing fixtures and you have a spec here. Now I understand. Oh, you want carpet or you want this type of hardwood. Now I understand. And they can go from like a class 5 budget up to a class 1. Even when you do that class 1 budget, there's still a tolerance level that's to be expected. So an accuracy range. And that class 1 budget means even projects that are perfectly designed will still be within a 5 to 10% plus or minus of where the actual cost is versus what the projected cost was at the beginning. Which to a lot of first-time landlords and developers, that's a scary number. Like, are you telling me it could be 10% more expensive? And the answer is yes, if everything's perfect.
Bank is usually looking for, if you're financing that, bank is usually looking for more contingency than 5 or 10%. Whenever I work on my projects, I put at least 15% contingency. I may not need that, but it's for pro forma, that's what they want to see.
Sure. And so when we talk about like the lowest level, which is really like a schematic plan, someone draws it up and goes, it looks more like a marketing plan. It has locations of walls, doors, and windows. It might have some room tags, but there's no interior elevations. There's no details. And you give that to a contractor and say, hey, can you price this? And this happens all the time. That's called like a level class 5, a class 5 level budget. And the plus or minus there is anywhere from negative 30% on the low end to plus 50% on the high end. So you're talking about an 80-point swing when you're dealing with that level of drawings. And as you start moving up and you say, okay, it's now more of a design development set. In Philadelphia, we usually call that like permit level drawings. Now you're looking at that plus or minus 15%, which is what a lot of lenders are going to look at as well, because that's what they're used to seeing in this type of market.
Yeah. So all of that sounds very complicated. So for people who's just maybe trying to get into real estate, or maybe they have a couple properties and now they're trying to do some bigger project or rehab that they've never done before, what are some basic elements that they should be looking at and understanding on floor plans and drawings? Because not everybody can read a drawing. Like what they should be looking at.
A lot of people can't read drawings. You know, it's kind of a special talent to be able to visualize space in that sort of way. I always say that's when you're going to rely on your design professional. You know, that's what architects and engineers go to school for. Architects are here to understand space. We're here to push you in the right direction and say, this is how a space is going to be best equipped for the needs that you're presenting to us. So we have that unique ability to be able to see space better than a layperson, to the point where some of our clients have no idea what they're looking at on our plans. We have one out-of-state investor who gives us about 8 to 10 projects a year. I don't think he's ever stepped foot in any of his properties. And truthfully, I don't know if he's ever even looked at the drawings. But he knows that we did the first one with him. We said, what do you think of this plan? He said, I don't know. Looks good, I guess. I don't know what I'm looking at. His contractors built it. He said, let's do it again and again and again. I like this. And slowly we've tweaked things to his preferences over the years, but he's a very hands-off client. Doesn't need to look at the drawings. And now, if you're talking about a Philadelphia landlord who wants to be a bit more hands-on, what they should do is sit down with their architect, you know, in person, over Zoom, anything like that, and say, explain what I'm looking at. And if they want to learn about that process, your design professional should be willing to help you learn about it. That's really the service industry of what we're doing as architects.
Okay. So beyond the architectural plans, what are drawings might a landlord need for common projects like plumbing, mechanical, electrical?
So if you're dealing with a single family home or a duplex, you typically just need the architectural drawings. And this is all assuming you're not going the easy permit route, which we spoke briefly about earlier, but you'll need the architectural set of drawings. If you're doing any structural modifications, new stairs or third floor addition, or building out the back or digging down and doing excavation, anything like that then requires structural drawings. So some architects will do that as part of their team. We offer structural engineering consulting services under us. That's just something that might become part of the process. When you get into bigger projects than that, or if they have a commercial component to it, it's a mixed use building with a coffee shop on the first floor and 2 apartments above, or it's a 50-unit apartment building. Those projects would then require what's called MEP drawings, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. So that's another consulting engineer that sometimes we have under us, sometimes our clients hire directly, but you'll need those special trade drawings that show the mechanical systems, the electrical systems, the plumbing systems, and all their single line diagrams so that you can go and get those respective permits.
Okay. So now we got all of that out of our way, and we have our plans, we have our drawings, and we're going out to contractors for the bids, to get our bids and understand what is the project actually going to cost us. What is your advice on getting multiple bids, and how do we create that breakdown of the project that contractors can bid us on the same project, and we would be able to compare apples to apples, versus we have a contractor who comes in and he tells me like, oh, it's going to be $100 per square foot. The other one gives me, it's going to be, I don't know, $200,000 for the whole project. And the third one comes in and gives me a breakdown of, I don't know, 200 different items with the cost next to them. How do we deal with that?
So the best way to do it, but also is usually the most time-consuming way to do it, is to give a RFP out to your contractors. So if you're planning to go out to 2, 3, 4 contractors, give them the criteria you're looking for. You can give them in a breakdown and say, I want to know exactly how much you're going to spend on your general conditions. I want to know how much you're going to spend on doors and windows. And you can go through what's called CSI divisions. So this is like the industry standard, is what's broken out into CSI divisions. Every part of construction falls under some type of CSI division. And most legitimate contractors should know what this is. Fly-by-night guys, not really. They're going to quote you square foot numbers, or they're going to say, I'll do the job for $200K. And if you say, what's your cost for Division 7? They go, I don't know what that means. But legitimate general contractors can give you that divisional breakdown and say, this is where my line items are going to be spent. And they'll give that to you. And now what you can do is create an Excel document and say, okay, contractor 1 had these items, contractor 2 had these items. And now you can do what's called bid leveling. And you can say, okay, this guy didn't include anything outside the building, but this guy did. So if contractor A included, $10,000 to do some stuff out in the backyard, but contractor B didn't, take that $10,000 from contractor A, put it in that line item for contractor B, and go, his number is now $10,000 more expensive because he should be doing that. You just want to align the scope and make sure that you're actually leveling it. Because the last thing you want to do is hire contractor B and say, this is great, you were cheap, we're going to go with you. He starts work and you say, hey, when are you getting to the backyard? And he goes, I didn't have anything in my price for that. So it allows you to, and we see this all the time, it allows you to do that bid leveling and create more of a level playing field.
So how, like in that example, how do I know if I need to have that work done in the backyard or not?
2 ways you can do it. It's either going to be shown on a drawing, or it's going to be in a separate scope of work. So you as the landlord can either rely on us and say, put every single thing they need to know in the drawing. And we can do that. Now that becomes a more robust package. There's a lot of details, a lot of documentation, takes a little longer. Alternatively, you can say, give me permit level drawings. Give me drawings that are good enough to get building permits. And you as Yuri is going to write up a scope of work document. And this might be just a Word document that's bullet pointed, and you say, contractor, I want stainless steel appliances. I want tiled showers. If you know the tile you want, tell them. Say, this is the tile I want from Doll Tile in the showers. This is the tile I want on the floor. And you can write all that up. And that's the document you hand out with the drawings and say, it's not just pricing off the drawings, you're also pricing off of this scope of work document. On larger projects, we get involved to write that scope of work document. On really large projects, that scope of work document turns into hundreds of pages outlined in CSI format, and you're giving it out to general contractors to bid on projects that are, $50 to $100 million construction jobs. But that's not what we're talking about with most Philadelphia landlords doing single family and duplexes. So the other thing I want to hit on is about going out and getting contractors' bids. You have the right to go out and get as many bids as you want, but you'll start to make some people mad if they find out that you're going out and getting 10 bids and you're always choosing the same guy. The other people then want nothing to do with you, so they're going to just jack their numbers up, or they're not going to give you a bid. So what I recommend is, it's about a long-term relationship. If you're actually seeking true bids, try to work with 2 or 3 reputable contractors, understand their process, try to create a long-term relationship, and don't value this just on how cheap they are. Value it about what they're going to do for you as a contractor. And there's always someone who will do it cheaper, and you typically get what you pay for.
You always get what you pay for. I don't think it's typically, it's always. So Jesse, this has been incredibly insightful and a lot of information. A lot of it just goes over your head because it's a lot. But to wrap things up here, if you had just one single piece of advice for a landlord or a developer in Philly, what would that be?
I would say it's do your best to communicate your needs. And that's communicating your needs, everything to your architect, explaining to your architect why you're doing the project, explain if this has an emotional connection, if it's financial, explain everything you can to your architect, to your contractor, and to everybody involved in the process. And when you have that open line of communication, projects just go really smooth. Most of the time when we hear about these horror stories of my architect screwed me over, my contractor screwed me over, we go, did they know they were supposed to do that? Did they know why you made that decision? And 99 times out of 100, they say, no, I guess they didn't actually know that. So keep that open line of communication and things go much smoother.
Okay, that's great advice. What is the best way for someone to find you or reach out to you by phone, email, online?
Yeah, so they can look us up online, jlsarchitects.com. There's a contact form there. Alternatively, you can reach us at general@jlsarchitects.com. So GENERAL@jlsarchitects.com. Or you can give our office a call and we'd be happy to talk to you there. So office line is 484-809-9151. We take calls, texts. People who don't like to talk on the phone, texts are always welcome. But those are usually the best ways to get in contact with us. And one of our representatives will reach out and look forward to hearing about your project.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Jesse, for joining us. That wraps up another insightful episode of the Philly Landlord Guy. Big thanks to Jesse Smith from JLS Architects for breaking down the complexities of Philly permits, understanding architecture plans, and helping us all avoid those costly pitfalls. Getting your plans right from the start on is not negotiable in this city. And Jesse's insights are a roadmap to doing it right. If you got value from today's conversation, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with another Philly landlord or a developer investor who needs to hear the straight talk. Until next time, keep buying smart, managing tight, and building with purpose here in Philadelphia.